And that is something that in the Western world you are not supposed to say. And especially you are not supposed to believe it. And naturally it was very difficult for Jesus, because he was saying all this in the context of the Hebrew culture. And he tried to find language in the Hebrew scriptures with which to express his state of consciousness, because he had an unusual state of consciousness. As I read it, he had cosmic consciousness, otherwise known as mystical experience, otherwise known as moksha, nirvana, bodhi, satori, fana elvana, or what you will. And that happens to people. It has happened as far back as we know. It happens all over the world and in all cultures. We don't know very much about it. We don't really know ways in which to make it happen, because it seems to be of the nature of it that it is a spontaneous surprise. But it unquestionably happens. And most people keep their mouths shut about it when it does. I had a friend who, in the middle of having a stroke, had this illumination. And he said to me, "I fear to speak to my friends of this, but it was the most beautiful experience. I shall never be afraid of death. In fact, I recommend everyone to have a stroke." This was my friend Jean Varda, lately deceased, Greek painter. But Jesus certainly had this transformation of consciousness. And he was crucified for it. Why? Because he had committed an act of insubordination and treason against the cosmic government. Because if you believe that God is a monarch, an absolute, omniscient, and omnipotent authority, shall we say a sort of cosmic ego, then to claim to be that is to introduce democracy into the kingdom of heaven, to usurp divine authority, and to speak in its name without proper authorization. And they asked Jesus, "By what authority do you speak? Of heaven or of men?" And he was tricky about answering that one. He said, "By what authority did John the Baptist speak?" And they were nervous about answering that one. He could have asked, "By what authority did Isaiah speak?" etc. Or Moses. But Moses became official authority. And if you could wangle it that what you said was simply an extension of what Moses said, because Rabbi so-and-so said it, who got it from Rabbi so-and-so, who got it from Rabbi so-and-so, who got it from Rabbi so-and-so, who got it from Moses, then it's okay. Notice this, that to be an authority today in the academic world depends on documentation. It's not enough to say, "For I say unto you." You must put in your footnotes. And the more the footnotes, the more the authority, obviously. So, our dissertations tend to be books about books, about books about books, and our libraries multiply by mitosis. So, when somebody speaks as an authority, that means speaks as the author. That's all it means.
So, he says, when somebody speaks as an authority, it means they speak as the author. That's all it means. Well, personally, I like that approach, because another way of saying it is that whenever somebody is spouting religious tracts of one sort or another to me, I know that they are in no way an authority, and so they can be safely ignored. Well, I hope that we haven't offended any of what Watts calls official religious people or official psychotherapists among our fellow saloners, but at least you can't say that you don't know where he stands on the questions of religion and of the American practice of defining every little trait of our children as something that needs to be treated with a prescription drug. Personally, I think it's a crime to drug our nation's children with these horrible pharmaceuticals. But, hey, that's just my opinion, and I'm aware that there are other sides to the story. sides, of course, that are usually told by people who think that medical marijuana is a joke, and so their opinions hold little sway with me. But let's get on to the next part of today's program. Now that we've heard Alan Watts' take on the concept of us recognizing the divine within us, let's see what he thinks about what's on the other side of the great beyond, the end result of a life well lived or a life not so well lived. Ultimately, no matter how much exercise you do and how well you eat and how good you are at avoiding the American Medical Association, well, the end result's still the same. And while the topic of death isn't often dealt with in polite company, it does seem like we should at least give it a little thought from time to time. After all, it's the ultimate trip, or so I have been led to think.
I have a friend, a girl, who's very intelligent and articulate, and she was born blind. And she hasn't the faintest idea what darkness is. The word means as little to her as the word light. So if you went to sleep, you're not aware of darkness when you're asleep. And so if you went into sleep, into unconsciousness for always and always and always, it wouldn't be at all like going into the dark. It wouldn't be at all like being buried alive. It would be as if, as a matter of fact, you had never existed at all. Not only you, but everything else as well. You would be in that state as if you had never been. And there, of course, there would be no problems. There would be no one to regret the loss of anything. You couldn't even call it a tragedy because there would be no one to experience it as a tragedy. It would be simple, nothing at all. Forever and for never. Because not only would you have no future, you would also have no past and no present. Now, you would think that that was the point where we'd say, well, let's talk about something else. But I'm not content with that. I demur. Because this makes me think of two other things. This state of nothingness makes me think, first of all, the only thing I get anywhere in my experience that's close to nothingness is the way my head looks to my eyes. Because I seem to feel that there is a world out there, as it were, confronting my eyes. And then behind my eyes, there isn't a black spot. There isn't even a hazy spot. There's nothing at all. I'm not aware of my head, as it were, as a black hole in the middle of all this luminous visual experience. It doesn't even have very clear edges because the field of vision is an oval. And if I run my fingers along my field of vision, it's like this. And this is the point where my fingers just disappear from sight. Vague edged. But then behind this oval of vision, there is nothing at all. Just from the sense of sight. Of course, if I use my fingers and touch, I can feel something behind my eyes. But if I use the sense of sight alone, there's just nothing there at all. Now, nevertheless, out of that blankness, I see. Well, that's the first thing it makes me think of. Now, the next thing it makes me think of is this. If, when I'm dead, I am as if I never had been, then that's the way I was before I was born. Because just as, if I try to go back behind my eyes and find what is there, I come to a blank. If I try to remember back and back and back and back, I've got my earliest memories. And then behind them, nothing. Total blank. But just as I know there's something behind my eyes by using my fingers on my head, so I know through other sources of information that before I was born there was something going on. There were my father and my mother and their fathers and mothers and the whole material environment of the earth and its life out of which they came, and behind that the solar system, and behind that the galaxy, and behind that all the galaxies, and behind that another blank, space. So I reason that if I go back when I'm dead to the state where I was before I was born, couldn't I happen again? You know, what has happened once can very well happen again. If it happened once, it's extraordinary. And it's not really very much more extraordinary if it happened all over again. So in other words, I do know for certain, because I've seen people die, and I've seen people born after them, that at any rate, after I die, not only somebody, but myriads of other beings will be born. That I know. We all know that. There's no doubt about it. But what worries us is that when we're dead, there could be nothing at all forever, as if that was something to worry about. Before you were born, there was this same nothing at all forever, and yet you happened. And if you happened once, you can happen again. Now, what does that mean? Well, we'll get at it first in its very simplest way, and to explain myself, I must invent a new verb. This is the verb to I. And in the first place, we'll spell that with the letter I, but instead of having it as a pronoun, we'll call it a verb. The universe eyes. It has eyed in me, and it eyes in you. Now let's respell the word E-Y-E. When I talk about to eye something, it means to look at something, to be aware of something. So we'll change the spelling and we'll say the universe eyes. It becomes aware of itself in each one of us. And it keeps on eyeing. And every time it eyes, every one of us in whom it eyes feels that he is the center of the whole thing. And that I know that you feel that you are I in just the same way that I feel that I am I. And we all have the same background of nothing. We don't remember having done it before. And yet it has been done before, again and again and again, not only before in time, but all around us everywhere else in space is the universe eyeing. Now look, let me try and make this clearer in this way. When I say it's the universe eyeing, who is eyeing? What do you mean by I? Well, there are two things you can mean by it. On the one hand, you can mean what's called your ego, your personality. But that's not your real eyeing, because your personality is your idea of yourself. It's your image of yourself. And that's made up of how you feel yourself, how you think about yourself, thrown in with what all your friends and relations have told you about yourself. So, your image of yourself, however, obviously isn't you, any more than your photograph is you, or any more than the image of anything is it. All our images of ourselves are nothing more than caricatures. They contain no information, for most of us, on how we grow our brains, how we work our nerves, how we circulate our blood, how we secrete with our glands, and how we shape our bones. That isn't contained in the sensation or the image we call the ego. So obviously then, the ego image is not myself. So myself contains all these factors that we could say the body is doing, the circulation of the blood, the breathing, the electrical activity of the nerves, all this is me, but I don't know anything about it. I don't know how it came together. I don't know how it's constructed. And yet, I do all that. If it is true also to say, I breathe, I walk, I think, I am conscious. I don't know how I manage to be, but I do it in the same way as I grow my hair. So, I must therefore locate the center of me, my I-ing, at a deeper level than my ego, which is my image or idea of myself. But how deep do we go? We can say the body is the I. But the body comes out of the rest of the universe, comes out of all its energy. So it's the universe that's I-ing. And the universe eyes in the same way that a tree apples or that a star shines. And the center of the appling is the tree, the center of the shining is the star, and so the basic center, or self, of the I-ing, which is called in this case Alan Watts, which is only a name for this particular physical organism, flowering from, shining out of this particular environment, makes the center of all this I-ing the eternal universe, or eternal. The thing has existed for 10,000 million years, and will probably go on for at least that much more. So we won't worry about how long it goes on. But repeatedly it eyes. So that it seems to me absolutely reasonable to assume that when I die, and this physical body evaporates and the whole memory system with it, then it will be all over once again, the awareness that I had before, not exactly the same way, but of a baby being born. There will, of course, be myriads of babies born, not only baby human beings, but baby frogs, baby rabbits, baby fruit flies, baby viruses, baby bacteria. And which one of them am I going to be? Only one of them, and yet every one of them, because this experience comes always in the singular, one at a time. But certainly one of them. Actually, it doesn't make much difference, because if I were born again as a fruit fly, I would think that being a fruit fly was the normal, ordinary course of events. And naturally, I would think that I was an important person, a highly cultured being, because fruit flies obviously have a high culture. We don't even know how to look for it, but probably they have all sorts of symphonies and music and artistic performances in the way light is reflected on their wings in different ways, the way they dance in the air. And they say, oh, look at her, she has real style. Look how the sunlight comes off her wings. And they, in their world, think they're as important and as civilized as we do in our world. So that if I were to wake up as a fruit fly, I wouldn't feel any different, as it were, than I do when I wake up as a human being. I would be used to it. Well, you say, though, it wouldn't be me. Because if it would be me again, I would have to remember how I was before. All right, but you don't now remember how you were before. And yet, you're content enough to be the me that you are. In fact, it's a thoroughly good arrangement in this world that we don't remember what it was before. Why? Because variety is the spice of life. And if we remembered, having done this again and again and again and again, we should get bored. And just as a memory is a beautiful thing to have, to remember, without memory we can't be intelligent. But just as I have explained that in order to see the figure, you have to have the background. In order that a memory be valuable, you've also got to have a forgettery. That's why we sleep every night, to refresh ourselves. We go into the unconscious so that coming back to the conscious is again a great experience. Well, when that's gone on long enough, when day after day we remember the days that have gone before, even though there's the interval of sleep, there comes a point when really, if we consider what is to our true liking, we will want to forget everything that went before, so that we can have the extraordinary experience of seeing the world once again through the eyes of a baby, whatever kind of baby, so that it's completely new. We have all the startling wonder that a child has, all the vividness of perception, which we can't have if we remember everything forever. So do you see what happens? The universe is a system which not only forgets itself and then again remembers anew, so that there's always this constant change and constant variety in the span of time, but it also does it in the span of space by looking at itself through every different living organism to give, as it were, an all-round view. You know, that's a way of getting rid of prejudice, getting rid of a one-sided view. So, death, in that sense, is a tremendous release from monotony. It puts an interval of total forgetting in a rhythmic process of on and off, so that you can begin all over again and never be bored. But the point is that if you fantasize the idea of being nothing for always and always and always, what you're really saying is, after I'm dead, the universe stops. And what I'm saying is, no, it goes on just as it did when you were born. You see, you may say that you think it incredible that you have more than one life. But I say, first of all, isn't it incredible that you have this one? Isn't it incredible that out of the nothing that is your past, here you are? Well, it's astonishing. So, if that's astonishing, it can always happen again and again and again. Now, what this is saying then is that just as you don't know how you manage to be conscious, how you manage to grow and shape this body of yours, that doesn't mean to say that you're not doing it. Equally, you don't know how the universe shines the stars, constellates the constellation, and galactifies the galaxies. You don't know. But that doesn't mean to say that you aren't doing it in just the same way as you're breathing without knowing how you breathe. If I say really and truly, I am this whole universe, or put it in another way, this particular organism is an eyeing being done by the whole universe. And somebody could say to me, well, who the hell do you think you are? Are you God? Do you warm up the galaxies? Canst thou bind the sweet influences of the Pleiades or loosen the bonds of Orion? And I reply to that, who the hell do you think you are? Can you tell me how you grow your brain, how you shape your eyeballs, and how you manage to see? Well, if you can't tell me that, I can't tell you how I warm up the galaxy. Only I've located the center of myself at a deeper and a more universal level than we are in our culture accustomed to do. So then, if that universal energy is the real me, the real self which eyes as all these different organisms spread out in different spaces or places and happening again and again and again at different times. We've got a marvelous system going in which you can be eternally surprised. The universe is really a system which keeps on surprising itself. The ambition that many of us have, especially in an age of technological competence, to have everything under our control, is a false ambition, because you've only got to think for one moment, what would it be like if you did really know and control everything? Supposing we had a super colossal technology which could go to our wildest dreams of technological competence, so that everything that is going to happen would be foreknown, predicted, and everything would be under our control.